slip out the back, Jack. Make a new plan, Stan. You don't need to be coy, Roy. Just get yourself free. Hop on the bus, Gus. You don't need to discuss much. Just drop off the key, leave, and get yourself free.
I don't know. I think the best way is having a
Jack.
shot.
Make a new plan, Stan. You don't need to be coy, Roy. You just...
It's going to get dark fairly soon.
Yeah, okay, we better do this. That's nice.
Hop on the bus.
And now, if you sit in your chair,
just drop off the key, and get yourself.
do you mind sitting in that chair for a second, even though you're going to be in that chair?
Make a new plan, Stan. You don't need to be coy, Roy. You just listen to me. Hop on the bus, Gus. You don't need to discuss much. Just drop off the keys, leave, and get yourself free.
See, it's recording now, so
Yeah. Well, it's
wow.
She said it grieves me so to see you in such pain.
What are your most vivid memories from your early childhood in South Africa and your migration to America?
most of my childhood at that time was taken up with practicing the violin and going from this little small town house to the main University of Music, School of Music there. And the conductor for the symphony orchestra was my violin teacher. And he teased me a lot. A lot of people just thought it was a novelty for a child to be playing. And everybody kind of made it fun, which was great, you know. I think letting me play nursery rhymes as much as what I didn't realize was classical music. Except, you know, you go to concerts and you see your teacher conducting a big orchestra. You know, I was 3 or 4 years old at the time. So by the time I was 5 or 6, I started to realize that this was, you know, something I really wanted.
How did you, as a child, why were you so disciplined? I mean, was that?
I don't think, I wouldn't call myself disciplined. I think it was something that I carry on now, thinking about how to help little tiny children enjoy the possibility that music can make noise and fun, and you don't have to, nobody preached and try to make a prodigy or a life of baby filmmaker and all that stuff. No, it was, I saw a lot of movies. I was very intrigued. Every musical I ever saw, my mom would let me sit through it at least twice. I met a lot of young, incredibly talented people at Juilliard. We went to school every Saturday on top of private lessons and stuff during the week. As I entered high school, it became a little apparent and somewhat disconcerting when people said, "You're not playing basketball today, you're not in gym class, where are you going, to university?" You know, they made fun of my time, but the discipline there had started because several great artists had heard me play at the age of 7 or 8 and said, "You really need to study in New York. That's where it is. You need to be with the greatest violin teacher ever." There were a few in America. And, you know, that discipline started right away. I wasn't sure until I was realizing they expected you to do at least 5 or 6 hours a day of practice alongside of your school. So it's heavy. My sort of way around a lot of it personally was to read, but also to listen to radio. I was a big fan of drama on radio or music on radio. And even though they did not want me to have a tiny radio, I did have one hidden under the pillow.
So in the late 50s, you and your partner Jack Arnold started A&R Recording Studio. How fast were you able to start making net profits from that, and did you guys go for broke setting that up?
Yeah, to answer I'd worked with Jack in a small studio as a demo engineer, learning engineering, and from Tom Dowd and people like that, and Bill Schwartow, and many younger great engineers sort of took me under their wing. I was mentored really well. I was still playing violin in a lot of places, but the development of an idea to start making the records that people were actually putting on radio and selling was far more interesting to me. And I think the interest in jazz and pop music had started when I was 12 or 13 at Juilliard.
Okay.
It wasn't highly encouraged because it wasn't being a serious musician. I see that in young people now, that we have to be diverse. It's really good for us.
So, so you're saying that back then people considered jazz music like people consider pop music today?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, if you talk to Kevin Spacey, he was there for musical theater. But I don't know how much drama he got. So, diversity was accomplished by sort of doing things that were looked and frowned upon. They'd find out, they'd see you on a television show and think that's not a good idea, even if you played something classical, other than PBS or something that's locally, like where Isaac Stern or any of the great players played. It's relaxed a lot more in the last 30 years. It had to.
Well, now there are jazz snobs.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's sort of like this. They're doing what was done to them.
Yeah, I think the accomplishment of a musician. If I challenged at 15 or 16, I went back into my teacher, then into the dean of the school. I wasn't precocious. I was just asking for guidance. I said, I've given myself deadlines. If I don't do this by 18 and I don't do this by 21, which would seem to be pivotal ages, and if I'm not a classically well-known artist or in that world, where would I go?
Right.
What would I do for a living? Well, you play in an orchestra? Well, that wasn't appealing. Would I play in a string quartet? It was interesting. But I'd fallen in love with what electronics did and how I was recorded and how other people were recorded. And because I worked in television as a youngster, 13, 14, all those ages, I spent my life in the control room.
Right.
In between takes, when you weren't needed for 5-6 hours, instead of going to some other lounge and say, we'll call you when we're ready for your shot, I stayed in the control rooms and learned what it was that I wanted to do. And to have a studio, which Jack Arnold and I would have, took more than courage, because we didn't have any money.
Right.
We both went and talked to the owner of the building, and either he thought, Jack was older than me, so Jack looked mature. If you look at the pictures of me, I really shouldn't have been, I should have been carded as I walked in.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because my enthusiasm and my look at what was an old insert stage for film, and I just looked at this, and it had some soundproofing. I said, we can rebuild this. I was like an old movie, you can take a barn and turn it into a theater, which we did. We basically did, and people came because the word of mouth from Don Fry, Bill Schwartow, these people, Tom Dow, would come and try the room and let people rehearse for nothing and record for nothing so that they could hear it. And after 6 months, the rumors got around town that this was a very independent, well thought out idea. There was a gentleman who was the advisor for Toscanini, and he loaned me some machines and microphones. Unknown things done for people that you really appreciate. I'll never forget him. And the funny thing is, after 6 or 8 months, he said, I've got to take this equipment back. I don't see that you've got much future in the business. So I called him last year. It was his 80th birthday. And I said, I'm still trying, working hard. Maybe you'll, and he just said, you're crazy.
In 1963, you engineered Leslie Gore's It's My Party with Quincy Jones as producer, right? Which is obviously a massive hit. Did you have any idea that it was going to be such a big hit when you were making it?
No, I mean, it was a very pop record, and she was probably 16 years old. Kind of no different than it is now, where Taylor Swift was that age, and other people have made hit records.
Right.
I knew it was a good song, I knew it was fun, and once we started that success for her, knew that she was a real good songwriter. I mean, things show up real quick.
Right.
And I'd also done a thing called Big Band Bossa Nova with Quincy, which became the Austin Powers theme. Funny enough that they went to copy it, and they never got that crazy sound of A&R recording, which is part of that very quirky, squeaky sound that's in that record, and the brass. And Quincy writes about it in his book, about the fact that many, many years later, they're still using it as the theme for Austin Powers.
Oh, I know. It's been used all
hip-hop.
over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been used all over. How do you think current events affect the kind of sound people want to both produce and hear?
You know, having lived through '68 with the shootings of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, Bobby Darin and other people kind of stripped their look and marched on cities, and a lot of activists did things, and songs were born. You know, We Shall Overcome. All of that came from that era. In the latter wars, including the ones in Iraq and places like that, there were songs, but they weren't as obvious. There was strife and being starved or hurt, or how do you write about explosions that are driven by somebody piling into them with a bomb that explodes? It has to be, news has changed so radically that became the exchange for where somebody would write a protest song.
Right.
They still do.
Yeah.
But they don't write about being in Iraq this month.
But do you also think that that record companies wanted to release music that was sort of escaped all that?
Yeah, I mean, the craze for disco has not really changed, because I totally believe that people will go out and dance and will get together and perform music for that reason, and probably not pay attention to a ton of the lyrics. You know, because that's the only night or time you have, whether it's at 10 p.m. till 6 in the morning, to unwind, and all of that music has survived.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily what's on the pop charts anymore.
Yeah.
Although hip-hop has had a good expression for the last 10 years of its poetry.
Right.
Good, bad, or indifferent. It says what's on the mind of people.
Right. Right.
And it's put to a beat.
Yeah.
And we have to give credit to a lot of that music, for it is the only expression for people who have never been, you know, taught all of the musicality, and yet they'll find music that Quincy Jones and many, many artists, you know, Duke Ellington and jazz people, particularly because when the first beginnings of scratchings, it was somebody's parents' records.
Right.
And they're going to Echo Park.
Got a brand new bag, Quincy's album, which has a very sort of surfer sound type of music to it. I was just wondering, do you guys sit around a lot before you make a record and talk about the sound you're going for, or do you play it by ear?
No, I think you for Quincy, or for people like a lot of the people I know, bands that are every ilk from U2, it's about the song. What do you think it requires? You try not to be formulaic at all. You shouldn't be. But once you get in the room, things happen when you play it for a band, and then somebody starts to play a great riff on the guitar. Oh, that's, you know, you can only sketch out so much of it.
A Star Is Born, that was
Yes.
a complete live recording, right?
Absolutely. Warner Brothers was very skeptical about us doing it that way.
Okay.
And so she agreed, and we all agreed to at least go in the studio beforehand in case we had to go to lip sync. Once we got on the road, the band that Christofferson led and the hand-picked players he loved, and I added a few like Booker T and a couple of other great players. We rehearsed like a band that was going to play every night in a club.
Right.
And we rehearsed every night. Discipline of whatever had to be, even if you're on the set at 6. Because they used the band in a lot of shots.
Right.
And they would stand around for hours, and I would beg them to let me have the band back, let them sleep in the morning for a bit, and let me rehearse them so when Barbara would come off shooting, without running to dailies, we set it up. At that time, I read that Jerry Lewis had done a lot of his comedy with a video camera attached to the main camera. That, you know, most shoots are one camera, and then second camera or camera 3,
Right.
you know, but that would be really expensive, and in a musical it's really hard to do.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And if you do a great take, you don't want to have to keep singing, but you have to. In order for us to do camera 3, camera 5's angles,
Yeah.
she would do it. And I told her, I said, it's going to be hard. But then we were able to work with the editor and say, steal the vocal from here because those 4 lines are better from take 2.
Okay.
I mean, it's now very common the way we work multi-track. And we had the first multi-track 40-track machine that had been built ever. And we redesigned a truck that we rented out of Canada. That became our home. And wherever she sang, whatever she did that had to do with music, we recorded live.
So when you did do that editing, did that mean, did you record to a click at all? Or, I mean,
No.
a metronome or nothing?
No.
But you were still, they were just did it the same way for each take, pretty much? They had the same?
Yeah, there was no room to take the essence of her performance, or Christofferson, or her standing in front of 100,000 people.
Yeah.
And worry about, I mean, she wasn't going to do 4 takes in front of the audience. They wouldn't ever
Yeah,
tolerate
okay.
it. Some stuff was reshot. We couldn't do it in front of the big audience, but we had a 1,000-seater too in Phoenix, and we had shot the finale of the picture with one classic camera, because Bob Surtees was one of the great black and white photographers of all time, and he shot center camera. And we also shot with a bunch of 16 millimeters and a whole bunch of things that were in what would become MTV 10 years later.
That's great.
I mean, I still go in the booth and do the Grammys as part of the truck that goes on the air. There's a lot of things that collect in there that are so fast, the decisions coming from another audio truck for something on stage to watching Pink swing upside down on a rope and be dipped in a can of water and still finish the song, doing all that kind of stuff. It keeps all of your arteries working.
Yeah.
And make sure everybody is tuned into what we're doing. It's not about me, it's about them, it's about you, it's about you on the cover of the record. It's about us making sure that there's many minutes of really you. That's the difference between a good record and a great record. And start to do that.
Yeah.
Oops.
You want to leave it, or?
Well, she should get it upstairs.
Happy birthday, Mr. President. Happy birthday to you.